All right, hello. It looks like I am live. I'm going to hit post on Tumblr real quick so that we have the link. And there we go. All right, so see if I'm kind of moving slow here. I'm just looking at the preview. Okay. All right, so we are live, and I'm going to just listen real quick and make sure my audio is coming through. So, okay, good. All right, audio's coming through. Good. Okay. So we are live today, and as I said in the description, I'm going to be talking about a little bit about schools reopening and about just and the mask mandates and kind of how we protect, protect the vulnerable, but also don't violate people's rights. We're still protecting liberty. And I wanted to start by talking about what my district and what other districts like mine are doing when it comes to this whole going back to school thing. And it's really frustrating because you're trying to, make a lot of people happy who have very different ideas of what we should be doing. And you've got, on the one hand, you've got parents and teachers and people in general who are like, hey, let's reopen. Let's go back to normal. And sorry, I'm coming through pixelated a little bit. I just seen that. My frame rate is weird, but let's see if I can fix that real quick. I'm just going to do that and see if my frame rate gets better. Before I go on, because otherwise that looks real weird. Sorry. No. Okay. I'll use that to make sure that I'm still coming through. Okay. Sounds good. All right. So anyway, so when we're looking at going back to in-person school, there's this kind of this balance of, you want kids to have socialization, you want them to have in-person learning experiences. There's a lot of downsides to learning from home, especially for families that don't have the resources or the preparation or the ability to put in all the effort and do all the things that are necessary in order to do that well. And I think we saw that in the spring with a lot of schools that were trying to do this online stuff and they really didn't know what was going on. Oh man, I am really lagging here. Let's see what I can do to make that easier. Mess up the stream. I'm gonna try one more thing. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay. we're just going to go with this and we'll see how it goes. And if it's really, really choppy when I watch the playback later, I will just make a separate video and upload it normally. But basically what we're looking at when we talk about going back to school and we talk about all of this kind of stuff, you're trying to balance so many different people's opinions, and not just within your own district or even within your own school and your own community. You're trying to balance opinions with people who don't even live in your state. and that's the problem, I think, with our center. But ultimately, it's like what one independent school district is doing. Somebody in another state has an opinion on what's happening. And I think there's just a lot of drama that has come with this. I'm going on Reddit, and I wanted to bring this up, and I'm hoping this won't ruin the frame rate again. And see if I can bring these up without... this is the one. There's one that I really wanted to show to y'all. Because I'm going on Reddit. I'm going to like the r/education. And there's this post that I ran into. And I don't know how well you can see it here. All right, let's see if we can see that here. And basically, as I'm looking at this post, it's this person who's got a master's degree in education, and which, I mean, a lot of people have master's degrees in education and have different opinions. So just because they have a master's degree does not mean that their opinion is the opinion or is like, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily make them an expert in the sense that we have to take their opinion at face value. We can evaluate. But they said, students can survive without school for a year. And they talk about the idea of just not having school this year at all. Not online, nothing. And taking a year and training teachers, which, okay. And what I'm going to get to on this is I think every school should have the ability to make their own plan. And if there's a school that wants to try this, but they're proposing this as a nationwide thing. They want everybody to do the same thing. And I have a problem with when we do that, because you're not allowing for flexibility. You're forcing everybody to follow the same standards. But their argument is that if you do this for everybody, then nobody falls behind, because who are you comparing them to? And my argument would be, we're trying to get them ready for something. We're not just, they're not just in school to compete against each other. They're in school to get ready for, for the next grade, and eventually for college and for life and for jobs. That's the theory anyway. So they go on this, but this is not really what I want to show you. What I wanted to show you was down here. It's actually this one. Here we go. This is the one. And it says, my wife is an educator. She's the only adult some of her students can depend on. Please pray for her. And then people in the comments are talking about what their districts are doing and their kind of concerns. And this is the one that I really just got to me. And it says, I'm a teacher in Iowa, one of 2 states with no mask mandate. We were initially told that we could plan for online, hybrid, or in person. And so some districts planned for virtual instruction. And then the governor changed that and said, no, you have to be in school. Every school has to do an in-school option, which was probably connected to President Trump saying that he was going to pull funding from schools that didn't open up 100% in person. And all of this, but then it says, health and safety standards are basically non-existent. Some teachers are writing up their wills and obituaries right now, not even joking. So this reminds me of one of the gun control arguments where it says, children are scared and therefore we need to ban guns. Well, it's like, no, people are scared not because they're in any real immediate danger for the most part. It's because that they have been taught that they need to be scared. They've been told by the media for months now that they need to be terrified. And so we've got these teachers that are just kind of like, they have this idea that they need to be terrified of the coronavirus, or of other people. And I think that's a problem for our society if we convince everybody that they should be terrified of other people. And that they're writing their obituaries. Like, it's one thing to update your will if you're kind of confronted with your own mortality, and that can happen in a lot of different ways. You have a near car crash, you're near missing a car crash. You get a car crash and you survive. You may choose, maybe I should update my will just in case. You never know what could happen, and that's fine. Like, that's a normal thing to do. But to write your obituary because you are so convinced that you are going to die from this, I just think is ridiculous. And I'm going to then show you this other one. And are any teachers considering life insurance beyond what is provided by their employers? It's like, you can talk about life insurance and stuff, but it says, given that we will most likely be returning to school in a hybrid scenario, or any of you considering purchasing life insurance? And I'd seen other posts where it was a teacher who claimed that her doctor told her to update her will and purchase life insurance if she was going back to school. And I just, it's the kind of thing that, I just don't think this is how we need to be reacting so much. And I think this is just, I think we're overreacting a lot to this whole thing. COVID-19 is very survivable for the vast majority of people. And the thing is, the vulnerable people know who they are. There are a select group of vulnerable people who are at high risk if they get COVID of developing serious complications and potentially dying. However, doctors are getting better at treating those serious complications. We're testing more and more of these therapeutics. There's research now going into selenium. There's research into, preventative measures. There's all kinds of research happening, and we're learning more about how to protect people. And this whole concept of that we need to be constantly afraid at all times of our, of each other, of society, of gathering. And as somebody who's concerned about liberty and who understands that we have things put in place for us to hold our government accountable, and one of those is our right to assembly. When we are told to be afraid of assembly, unless, of course, it is assembly that is sanctioned by either your local or federal government, And that's the thing, is like with the Black Lives Matter protests, it's like, yeah, go protest. But then I should also be able to go protest about something that I care about and not be told that I'm selfish and killing people by protesting. If we're going to say, yes, go protest, then it should be everybody, yes, go protest. So, it's just this idea that we just have to be so scared of each other, that we have to be scared of communicating in person, of seeing each other. And the teachers need to be scared of their students. And I worry about that as well, that this is going to ruin student-teacher relationships when teachers have this fear of their students. This has made us all into germaphobes, where we're like, oh, can't shake your hand, can't get anywhere near you. Oh, don't touch me. You've got germs. Spray the disinfectant spray. But what I'm looking at, like, my district's plan, like my school's plan, and I'm looking at our plan, and I'm looking at how we are telling our students that they, I teach middle school, so these are 11 to 13-year-olds, and we're telling them that they have to come in the morning, and if they get their breakfast in the cafeteria, they stop off and they get their breakfast, and then they go to their classroom. They sit down at their assigned desk, and they stay there all day. And apparently they get to move maybe for some electives, maybe, but not all at the same time. And, they're not getting to move around and see their friends. And it's just not realistic that you're going to have a student sit in one desk all day long with in front of a Chromebook, in front of a laptop, staring at a screen, not getting up and moving around, not doing different stations. A lot of teachers use stations where it's like, oh, we've got, one of the things that I've loved that happens at my school is that the math teachers do this a lot, where they will put math problems up in the hallways, and during class, like, the students they'll take the students out into the hallways, and the students get to spread out. They get to go and do these math problems. We're not going to be able to do that. That's not going to be feasible in this system. And then I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be primarily a babysitter as a teacher. And that concerns me as well. I'm still going to be responsible for creating lesson plans, for putting together lesson plans, and teaching to some extent. But my school day it seems like it's going to primarily be babysitting. That I'm going to have, my pre-recorded lecture, my pre-recorded lesson posted on our, online LMS, system. And, to my students, some of whom are in my classroom, some of whom are in another classroom, some of whom are at home. And I'm going to have all these different students, some of which I will actually see in person, others I won't. And I'm going to post my pre-recorded lesson, and then they're going to be able to ask me questions, and I have to be at my computer to answer their questions, right? But I also have to be monitoring the 12 students that are in my classroom. And I have to monitor them almost the entire day. And then, with the exception of about an hour and a half block where somebody's going to come relieve me so that I can have my conference period, which, is normally my planning period, meetings, things like that. But the thing is, my planning period is normally in my classroom. That's when I get work done. That's when I get grading done. So now the concept is that I have to not only, be trying to teach, but also monitor students that are not technically engaged with what I'm doing. So I'm teaching a lesson, I'm doing an activity with a group of students, but I've also got 12 students here who are not doing that. They're all doing individual different things. And I'm supposed to be monitoring them and making sure that they're not getting into trouble, and that they're not doing anything they're not supposed to be doing, and that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But also, and it doesn't feel like it's gonna make any sense once we get in there, and I feel like it's just gonna all fall apart. And we're gonna go back there the first day that we go back, when we go back, which they're gonna keep pushing back the date. I would be surprised if we actually went back to in-person this fall semester, just because they've kind of left the door open to keep pushing back the date, depending on our positive case numbers or whatever. So they're going to keep pushing back the date. But when we eventually go back to in-person, that first day, we're going to put all these signs around about social distancing. We're going to have all these plexiglass dividers in different places, and we're going to tell them all to wear masks. And we're going to have students come in that very first day. And I guarantee you, we're going to have students that just run up to hug each other because they have not seen their friend in 5-6 months or more, depending on how long it takes us to go back. And I do not want to have to be the one who goes up and says, no, you can't talk to each other. You can't hug each other. You have to stand 6 feet apart, even though you haven't seen each other in 6 months. I don't want to be that person. I do not want to have to do that. But it's gonna fall on me, or it's gonna fall on another teacher. It's gonna fall on teachers to be policing our students' interactions with each other even more so than we already do. We normally police them to the extent of making sure that they're safe and that they're not disrupting learning. But now we're like, you can't hug each other, because then you might transmit COVID. And even though neither of you are at risk for complications, we have teachers who might be. And so because you hugged each other, one of you might spread COVID to that teacher. And it just is so abstracted from the reality of their lives that it's not going to make sense to them. It doesn't hardly make sense to me, but we're going to be sitting there telling them that they can't hug each other, that they have to stay 6 feet apart. I mean, who's going to be walking around with the 2 yardsticks taped together going, no, you're not 6 feet apart, And you think about that, the kind of the stereotype of the school dance where the teacher walks around with a ruler making sure the couples are a foot apart. Now we're going to be walking around with 2 yardsticks saying you have to be 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And that's just ridiculous. And that's not a learning environment. My other huge concern with our learning environments right now is that over the last 10 to 20 years, there has been a huge effort to make classrooms more welcoming and safe and, spaces that are more conducive to learning, to actual like education, not just sitting there in my desk, receiving information into my brain and hoping I remember it for the test, but like actual learning, actual collaboration and problem solving and working together as a group. So we've been creating these spaces in our classrooms that are great for collaboration, that are comfortable, that make students feel at ease so that they can drop their guard and actually learn. And all of that's going to be gone. We have teachers at my school were told that they had to remove all their soft furniture, couches, bean bags, anything like that, anything that essentially isn't a chair and a desk. They have to remove, and any clutter, any stuff in their classroom that they don't actually need, they have to remove. And so I've got stuff I'm gonna have to take out that I was storing in my classroom. And I'm gonna have to take out because we're trying to reduce the number of surfaces we have to clean. And and the teachers were also told that they can't store that extra furniture anywhere on campus. They have to actually take it with them. And I'm just thinking, how many of these teachers who do have beanbags, who do have couches in their classrooms, who do have different seating options, like flexible seating options. We've been talking about flexible seating for years as the best way, as the optimal way to arrange your classroom is with this flexible seating and students being able to choose preferred seating. And now we've taken that all out. Now we're going to have rows of, 3 rows of 4 desks or 4 rows of 3, or however we want to do it, 12 desks in a classroom, spaced 6 feet apart, students sitting at their desk with their Chromebook in front of them, doing their schoolwork all day long. No getting up and moving, no changing classrooms and changing class composition so that you can see different people and get away from people you don't like. Because in any class, you're going to have students that don't get along. But the nice thing about middle school is that you change classes. And so you have that student you don't get along with, you get to go and not be with them all day. You don't have them in all of your classes usually. And yet we're putting them in that situation where they're going to feel like they're back in elementary school. And it's not going to go well. And so much of this, really the way that we're setting up our classrooms, it really feels like STAR test, which is our Texas standardized, test that they take at the end of the year. They take it in April and May and, different for different subjects. And for STAR test, you sit in the rows and you're all doing your own work and you can't talk to each other and you can't socialize and you have to ask permission to get up out of your seat and you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You have to, you have no freedom. And it's very demoralizing, and it feels very oppressive and demoralizing for me as a teacher. It does, and I know it does for my students, because usually we have about 2 days in a row of testing, maybe 3, usually never more than 2. 2 days in a row of testing, and on the second day, the students are ready to riot. Right? They are so done with this. They want to go back to their normal classrooms. They want to go back to their free choice seating or their flexible seating or whatever system they had in their, in their other classrooms. They want to see their friends. They want to talk to their friends. And so it's just so demoralizing, and they're so resistant to it by the end of the second day. And now we're talking about making them do this for an entire school year. Not just 2 days, not just a week. We're talking about an entire school year of sit in your desk, don't move, don't get up. And how am I supposed to, differentiate between a student who really needs to go to the bathroom and a student who wants to go see their friends? And how are you going to prevent students from, on their Chromebook, communicating with each other? Because they're supposed to be communicating with each other. We're supposed to have discussions and all that stuff. And you have a student who emails their friend, oh hey, at 12:25, ask to go to the bathroom and we'll meet to, in the hallway or whatever. They're going to do that, and it's going to be a huge issue. And then what they're going to tell us is that they can only go to the bathroom X number of times per day. Seriously, that's what they're going to do. They're going to tell us, because they more or less did that last year. They had a little bathroom test, and they could check off how many times they'd gone to the bathroom in each of their classes. And during a grading period, like a 6-week grading period, they can only leave their class X number of times to go to the bathroom. And because they were supposed to go to the bathroom in between classes. But now there is no in between classes. They've got a block schedule. Like, now you're doing this class, now you're doing this class. But there's no getting up and moving and going out in the hallway and going to the bathroom on your way to your next class. To my knowledge, they're not supposed to leave the classroom. Even during those breaks, we're going to have these little 10-minute breaks in between classes where I'm supposed to do, like, somehow fun activities that don't involve them getting up and moving around. And I'm like, have you met middle schoolers? Have you met these children? This is not going to work. This is not going to end well. We're going to have a riot on our hands. And that's for the students that even show up. We're going to have lots of students that stay home, and they're not going to be able to socialize. And some of them, and the real problem is the students that, that stay home and who don't have the support at home to actually get their work done and stay caught up. And we're going to have students who are already falling behind. We're going to see them fall behind even more. And the differentiation is going to be more difficult, because some students really do well on the Chromebooks. Some students, you give them a piece of technology and they do much better work, and that's awesome. Other students don't. Other students need to work on paper, but that gets really difficult. And when you've got all these different students and so it's a disaster. But it really comes back to the big problem with public education. And the reason why I have said on my Tumblr, and I've said other places, that we need to abolish the public education system, and it's not a good system, and there's no level of reform that we can do that is going to fix all our problems. There's no way that we are just going to do this reform here or add this amount of funding and that's going to fix everything. No. We have to get out of this idea of this national or even state or even necessarily local school system where all these different schools, all these different campuses all have to function relatively the same. And, each state kind of has their little differences, but those are mostly cosmetic. The foundation of the school system is rotten. The foundation is broken. So little cosmetic changes here, little pieces of legislative reform there, those are not going to fix the deep-rooted problems in our school system. And this pandemic stuff is not helping. It's actually, if anything, it's exposing the cracks in the foundation. So if anything, there is that benefit. There is that good thing, that it's exposing the cracks in the foundation. So what I want to see every individual campus making their own decisions here, based on the staff input, based on the parent input, even based on student input. I want them making their own decisions, and no district, no state telling individual schools how they have to operate. But the problem with that is the state and the federal government are funding these schools. And when you accept funding, you accept control. And I've said this before with, if you're planning a wedding and your parents are paying for the wedding, like you're planning your wedding, but your parents are the ones paying for it. They're the ones paying the bill. They get an element of control over the things you plan. You can't just do whatever you want because they're paying for it. You have to run things by them and get their okay. And they may say no, and they can veto things because you're not the one paying for it. And the same thing goes for our school system, is because the states are paying for it and because the property taxes are paying for it. So the taxpayers, are paying for it. And because the federal government is paying for it with taxpayer dollars, you're accepting a level of control over your operations that doesn't have to exist. You don't have to accept that level of control if you are funded a different way. If you're funded through tuition, we get rid of property tax, we get rid of all the taxes, right? And the schools fund themselves through tuition or through scholarships, through donations, fundraising, right? And we have private schools, we have people homeschooling. You don't have to pay tuition to homeschool. You do have to make arrangements with your work schedule and with your life and family schedule, but you don't have to pay tuition. And if you didn't have to pay property tax and you didn't have to pay income tax and you didn't have to pay whatever tax, and you might have an easier time making those arrangements if you didn't have all those other bills to pay. So my point is that I would like to see more local control, but that also means more local funding, and less federal and even state funding. And we need to really re-examine how our schools are run, and we need to examine a system in which schools are free not just to choose if they want to go back in person or online, but they're free to choose how they want to run their system. We need to get out of all these assumptions. We make all these assumptions about education, and we have all these unwritten rules, or in some cases written rules that we don't question. Why do we group students by age instead of by their ability in different areas, their different skill levels? Why aren't we putting all the students that are at this level of math together so that we can teach them this level of math versus having a group of students? Well, these students are all 12 years old, and this one is at this level of math, and this one's down at this level of math, and this one's way over here. And the teacher's trying to teach all these students and trying to get them all to be at the same point. And that point that the teacher's trying to get them to is this student's already passed it and they're bored. This student is nowhere near that and they're frustrated. This student doesn't know what class we're in. And it's you're trying to get them all into the same, you're trying to conform them all to a set of standards versus growing them as individuals and saying, who are you as an individual and what do you need in order to grow and learn and be educated? Not just to know how to do math, but how to be an educated person who is prepared to go out into the world to get a job, to work for a living, to provide for themselves and their families, to make educated decisions, about their life, about who they vote for, and, whatever the case may be. How are we providing that education to students when we have these top-down, one-size-fits-all policies? We're not. So that's my little rant about schools. And and if you have questions about the school stuff, feel free to put those in the chat or put those in the comments later. I'll read those and I'll kind of respond to them later, especially if you're watching after this live stream is done. So feel free to put those questions in there whenever, and I can get to those. But I also wanted to talk about mask mandates, and I wanted to talk to one of the things that I put on the description was how to protect the vulnerable and also protect liberty. And that's kind of goes hand in hand with the mask mandates. So one of my concerns with the masks, besides the fact that we shouldn't be mandating things like this, the government shouldn't be mandating things in general, it's not a good thing. It's one thing for the government to say you can't do this because it hurts somebody else. It's another thing for the government to say you have to do this because not doing it might hurt somebody else, maybe. We don't know for sure. And doing this might protect them. Again, we're not sure. And with the masks, people like to show me these studies that are not good studies. Trying to prove that masks prevent the spread of coronavirus. The problem is that we don't have some conclusive consensus, all the scientists agree that this is the case. We have a few studies that say maybe masks are effective, and we have a few studies that say maybe masks are not effective or even harmful in some cases. And the problem is that the way that we've set up our media with our censorship of different ideas, that you have different, peer-reviewed, randomized control trials that have different results. And rather than looking at these studies and saying, what's different about how these studies were done? What are the differences in how these were set up? What are the different assumptions that are being made? Instead of analyzing this information and trying to come to some kind of conclusion, what we've done is said, well, this one over here, this one disagrees with the official position of the CDC and the WHO, so we're going to throw it away. And if you promote it, you're promoting misinformation, and we're going to delete your account, and we're going to ban you from our social media platform because you're spreading misinformation. And it's like, that's not how science works. Science says we look at the data, we look at the results, and we analyze. And if there's a disagreement, we investigate. We don't just say, oh, well, we'll just pick one of these, the one that we like, and throw out the other one. That's not science, right? And so this was a big issue with Ben Swan, and I posted his video on Tumblr, and Tumblr deleted it. And I didn't realize right away, I didn't see the email right away that said that they deleted it. And so I was confused when somebody else claimed that I had deleted it. And I was like, no, I didn't. What happened to the video? I went and looked up, and sure enough, it's gone. And it had been fact checked on Facebook by these independent fact checkers who didn't really disprove what he had said. They just said, oh, well, you didn't include all these other studies. Like, well, yeah, that was the point. The point was he was giving the studies that weren't being included by the mainstream media. The mainstream media was only showing these studies and not these studies. And he's like, well, let's look at these studies. And they're like, well, why don't you look at these? It's like, no, we looked at these studies. You talked about these studies ad nauseum. Let's go look at some other studies, please. And that's the problem, is that we're excluding data because it doesn't fit a narrative, and that's not science. That's not a valid way to do science or anything like that. So I think we need to be looking at the science. We need to acknowledge that the science is not settled, and science doesn't settle. Science challenges, science questions, science tests and proves or doesn't prove. Science doesn't prove things. Science disproves things. You have a hypothesis, and the research disproves it or fails to disprove it, which then is often, if you fail to disprove something enough times with good study design and good research, good experimental design, then you can say, well, it's probably true. But you have to repeat it. You have to have repeated randomized controlled trials. Mathematical models are not randomized controlled trials. They'll say, oh, this new study from blah, 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 blah says that if we just wore masks for 2 to 3 months, we would get rid of coronavirus or whatever they claim. The thing is, I could create a study. I could create a mathematical model, because these aren't studies in that sense. They're not research. They're not experiments. These are mathematical models. Mathematical models are algorithms based on assumptions. You have these set of assumptions, you plug in some numbers, and you get a result. But the problem is, if your assumptions are bad, the whole thing is bad. And the assumption that they have plugged in is that masks work. They have plugged in this assumption that masks reduce spread by whatever percent. And therefore, if the X percent of people wore masks for X amount of time, we would reduce spread by X amount, blah, 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 blah. But I could create a mathematical model that says that distributing free bags of Cheetos, at health clinics would save X number of lives from cancer deaths. We would prevent X number of cancer deaths. If I could create this model, if I plugged in the assumption that eating Cheetos prevents cancer. If I plug in that model, or I plug in that assumption into my model, then yes, putting free Cheeto bags in all the health centers would reduce cancer. But that assumption is not true. And I have not tested that assumption. If anything, that assumption is probably the opposite. But I have not tested my assumptions. I've just make them, and I've plugged them in, and I said, well, this study shows. And that's the problem with these studies that show that masks will save us, is that you're plugging in an assumption that the mask prevents spread of the virus when we don't have that as settled. That's not settled science. That's not a consensus. We don't have enough evidence to say that with any kind of conclusive, certainty. And so to pretend that we that all the scientists agree and the science is settled, while silencing and suppressing those who say, well, no, wait a second, what about this study over here? That's not being honest. That's not intellectual honesty. That's not liberty. That's not how our society is supposed to work. That's not seeking truth. Now, that's not to say that you can't wear a mask. You shouldn't ever wear a mask. I would never tell anybody, don't wear a mask. But it should be up to people, should be able to do their own research, come to their own conclusions. Like if I do the research and I come to the conclusion that, I'm more likely to get COVID by wearing a cloth mask because I know I'm not going to be doing the job I should be doing of, disinfecting my mask and not touching it and not touching my face and all that kind of stuff. If I know that my cloth mask is more likely to cause me to get the virus than to prevent it, then maybe I shouldn't wear a mask. And if I have a health issue, or if I have even a mental health issue, somebody has a mental health issue that makes wearing a mask really difficult, and they come to the conclusion that the benefits are negligible and the drawbacks are significant, then they may choose not to wear a mask, and that should be okay. They should be able to make an informed decision based on the research, and they should be able to look at the different studies and not have certain studies censored because they don't fit the narrative. And so to protect the vulnerable, we need to first of all identify who the vulnerable are, which we've done. We have a good list of here's all the different factors that make somebody vulnerable. Different illnesses, age groups, things like that. We know who's vulnerable, and the people who are vulnerable know that they are vulnerable. They do. There's not this like group of people out there that are super vulnerable to coronavirus and don't know it. There's not. The only way you could make that argument is because we've reduced the amount of diagnostic testing and preventative care, and so people may have conditions they don't know about because they haven't been able to go to the doctor because their doctor's been, seeing only emergency patients. So you can make that argument, but that doesn't support lockdowns. That doesn't support mask mandates. That supports us getting back to normal so people can actually find out that they have cancer, or find out that they have type 2 diabetes, or find out that they've got whatever other condition. But if the people who are vulnerable know that they are vulnerable, then they can take precautions. And here's the thing, because people keep saying, well, let's just pay everyone to stay home. That's the answer. Pay everybody to stay home. First of all, with what money? Because if people aren't working and they're not creating wealth in the economy, right? Money doesn't just move around. Money, wealth, and growth in the economy are created by work. People work with resources and create new growth in the economy. If the economy it becomes stagnant because people stay home and people are using resources but not contributing back because we've shut everything down and we said we're just going to pay you, then what we're doing is printing money, and we're going to have huge economic problems from that. But what if instead of paying everybody to stay home, including the healthy people, including the people who have little to no chance of even symptoms, much less severe complications from coronavirus, what if instead we took that group of people that is vulnerable, that have these vulnerabilities, that are at high risk, and we worked through charities and other local organizations, nonprofits, voluntary interactions here, voluntary transactions. And we said, okay, we're gonna surround you with a network, a support network of people who will take care of you, people who will buy your groceries and bring them to you and drop them off and back away so that we don't come in contact with you. We're gonna have doctors that will do telehealth with you. We're gonna either kind of help you pay your rent and help you pay your bills if you can't go to work, or help you get a job that you can do from home. Maybe it's just a matter of a career change or a job change where now you're able to, what's something that you could do where you could earn money from home. And we can work with that group of people. We take just that group of people that are vulnerable and we work with them specifically to set up this support network that protects them and allows them to stay safe until we have good enough therapeutics that we know that if they get the virus, we can treat them and that they're not at this high risk, or the virus becomes, we have enough herd immunity from the rest of us that they're less likely to get the virus because we all have antibodies or we all have immunity. If we can surround them and protect them and support them through voluntary interactions, through charities and nonprofits, and through businesses that are understanding, and the rest of the economy can go back to work, can go back to normal, and can keep the economy functioning so that we can afford to take care of them, then we can actually protect those vulnerable people without getting the government to force us to, without having the government force us to stay away from them, without having the government force us to all shut down our businesses just in case we run into somebody who's vulnerable. What if instead those vulnerable people said, hi, I'm vulnerable and I need support. And we said, okay, great. And it's not like we're going to go hunt people down and be like, you need our support. Like, we're not going to do that. It's going to be somebody saying, hey, I'm vulnerable. I need support. Please help me. And then we go, okay, great. We're going to come help you. We're going to put all this, stuff together for you. We're going to make this work for you. And then, we're able to function. And we allow those vulnerable people to make their own decisions about risk, to make informed decisions about the risk. Because I want you to imagine somebody who's 90 years old. Could be lived, was a kid during World War II, is 90-year-old, grew up through survived all these different things, all throughout their life. And they've been going, we have all these dance halls in Texas, and they're all cute. These like kind of saloon, like Old West dance halls. And a lot of the people there are older, right? A lot of people who go to those dance halls are older people. And this 90-year-old guy, he and his 90-year-old wife, they've been going to this dance hall every weekend for 40 years, at least. And this is what they do. It's how they stay active. It's how they stay healthy. And they say, you know what, we're going to keep going to our dance hall, even though there's a risk of COVID. Because number one, we're 90 years old and we're going to live our life. We don't know how much time we have left anyway. We're going to live that time. We're not going to hide in fear and spend that time hiding. And number two, if you work with seniors, if you work with older people, you know that the one primary indicator of how long they live and how healthy they are and what their quality of life is and all of that, the number one indicator is that they stay active. If they stay active, doing things that they love, they stay healthy longer. They're more resistant to disease. They recover faster from injuries. Their mental acuity stays sharp. When they are isolated, when they are cut off from their favorite activities, when they are cut off from their loved ones, their health declines rapidly. They're more likely to get sick. They're more likely to get hurt. They are more likely to lose mental acuity. And what have we done to our elderly people, to our seniors? We have isolated them. We have cut them off from their activities that they love. We have cut them off from their family members. So while we are protecting them from COVID, we may actually be dooming them to a shorter life, we may be cutting their remaining time short because we have taken away everything in their life that was helping them stay active, that was helping them stay young, stay healthy. And it's so important that we recognize what is actually best for those people who are vulnerable. Now, there are other people who are vulnerable who really do need to stay isolated because they have all these other conditions anyway, and they do have these compromised immune systems. And again, that's why we need to have nonprofits, community organizations, voluntary interactions surrounding that person, networking with them, providing them support so that they can stay isolated, or so that they can at least, whatever level of precaution they feel that they need to take, that they can do so. But we need to also allow for the person who says, you know what? I'm not going, I could also die from the pre-existing condition that I have, or I could die from old age, or I could die from all these things. I want to live my life. I want to go to work. I want to go to school. I want to travel. I want to go to Rome, whatever it is. Like, they may have goals that they want to accomplish. Instead, we're telling them, no, you have to stay home and stay healthy and don't talk to people. Or you can only talk to people over video chat, over technology that, especially for older people that you don't understand, like that you struggle with, that you can't talk to people face to face in real life. I just think that's so backwards from what we need to be doing for our seniors. They need to be active, they need to be engaged, they need to be social in order to, stay healthy and have that good, long, healthy life. That, yes, we maybe protect them from COVID, but we can't protect them from everything. And all these other things are going to happen to them if we don't, do this, if we don't take this seriously. So, I say all this, and, it honestly, it has to come down to people evaluating their own risk, taking their own levels of precautions, and the rest of society being understanding. And I think one of the reasons we've had so much pushback on all of these preventative measures, things like masks, things like lockdowns, things like stay-home orders, is because they've been forced upon everyone, regardless of whether or not you're vulnerable, regardless of whether or not you're sick. They've been forced on all of us. And I think if instead, from the beginning, we had said, hey, here are some guidelines, and you choose how to implement them in a way that makes sense for yourself, for your business, for your organization. And we said, you figure that out. And restaurants could have been flexible and creative and innovative in keeping their customers safe and keeping their staff safe. And, retail stores could have been flexible and creative, and all these people could have made their own decisions, and stores could have chosen to close down. They could have chosen to close down and say, you know what, we need to close down for a little bit, even just for a little bit, to figure out how to best reopen. But instead we said, no, you have to shut down. You have to stay home. You have to wear a mask. You have to do this. You have to do that. Your kids can't go to school. Instead, what it has to be is, here are the guidelines. Here's who's at risk. Here's how it's transmitted. Here's how it can be treated. Here are the outcomes for different groups of people. You make your own decision. And we'll support you in the decision that you make. And that's key. Because I've had some people express concerns to me where they've said, I appreciate what you're saying about liberty, but I'm vulnerable, and, I'm worried that my boss wouldn't let me work from home. It's like, well, that needs to be the conversation that we have, where instead of this, everybody has to stay home and everybody has to do this, we need to be talking instead about, okay, how do we protect these vulnerable people? And what are you doing as a company? We need to talk to companies and say, what are you doing as a company to protect your vulnerable employees, while letting the rest of your employees come back and getting your business going? We don't want you to shut down. We don't want you to lose business. We want you to be able to protect your employees while also make money, because that's what you exist to do as a business. So if we can talk to those businesses and say, yes, you can make money, you can protect your vulnerable employees, and we will help you do that. We will give you guidelines, we will give you ideas, we will give you strategies. I think we can do that, but we have to get past this idea of everything has to be mandated and everything has to come down from the top level of government, and that if your governor doesn't lock down your state and mandate masks and fine you $2,000, it's $2,000 here in Austin if you don't wear a mask, right? Fine you $2,000 for not wearing a mask. If your governor doesn't do all those things, if your mayor doesn't do all those things, your county doesn't, or if the president doesn't do all these things, then they're bad leadership and they want people to die. We have to get out of that mindset. It has to be about personal choice. It has to be about evaluating personal risk. And it has to be about us stepping up to protect those who need to isolate while letting everybody else get back to their life. So I know I kind of went long today. Thank you so much for those of y'all who tuned in and listened, and thank you to those who are watching later. If you can thumbs up the video, if you can leave a comment, if you had questions or you want me to address something that I didn't talk about here, or you have a critique, you have a comeback or whatever, feel free to leave those. All along the video, my social media links and the coffee link, the Buy Me a Coffee link, are all there on the bottom. So thank you so much for tuning in.